Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching with Rabbi Michael Berenbaum.
We're going to do something that in the 27 years that I've been associated with this, actually 28 years that I've been associated with the congregation, we've never done, which is that between Pesach and Shavuot, during Mincha, you are supposed to read one chapter from Pirkei Avot, one chapter of what is called the teaching of our sages, Pirkei Avot, chapters of our fathers, as it were, which is normally translated sometimes as ethics of our fathers. And each Shabbat, there are 7 Shabbatot between Pesach and Shavuot, and there are actually 6 Shabbatot between Pesach and Shavuot, and we read one chapter each week, and therefore during the traditional year you would have finished one of the Masechet, one of the elements of the Talmud. So let's turn to and it is included in the Siddur. So let's turn, we are now going to be in week 4, but I want to give you we're going to begin with chapter 1, chapter 1, Perek 1. We're going to read 1 so you understand what is the intention here. And you will see that you know many of the phrases, you know much of the teaching, but this will give you a good sense of the way in which we should think between the Exodus and Sinai, which are the 2 great formative experiences of the Jewish people that shaped the Jewish people forever. 235, please turn to in your Siddurim. It is in your Siddurim. I'm not sure how many of you knew that it was in your Siddurim, but it's been here all along, and if services ever get boring, not during the rabbi's sermon, because that never gets boring, but if services ever get boring, you are invited to study this because it's there. Let's begin with chapter 1, because I want to, again, stress part of what we are all about, and this works very well. Diane, why don't you read the first Mishnah of chapter 1?
Chapter 1. Moses received Torah at Sinai. He transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets to the members of the Great Assembly. They formulated 3 precepts. Be cautious in rendering a decision, rear many students, and build a fence to protect the Torah.
Okay, for us, the most important part of this is the question of transmission. You receive, you transmit, you receive, you transmit, you receive, you transmit. And that is that transmission is part of what is involved in Torah. It is not enough to receive Torah, you must transmit Torah. And then what you're going to see throughout is it's not enough to transmit Torah, but you have to make your own impression on Torah, you have to add to Torah. And they formulated 3 precepts, essentially. The 3 precepts are be cautious in rendering a decision, which is that since they were judges, and a judge must be very cautious in rendering a decision, and must listen to both sides, must adjudicate, must hear, must weigh the evidence, must make a reasoned and rational and disciplined decision. Rear many students, which means we don't want to be the last. We want to be what? The people who transmit and who create. And then build a fence around the Torah. And the fence around the Torah means that essentially you want to create something that a fence means you protect it, you preserve it. And we'll see that there is always a tension between building a fence and transmitting, building a fence and adding to it in a very basic way. Now let's turn to chapter 4. And if we go to chapter 4, because that's what we should be reading today, we'll read a couple of Mishnayot of chapter 4. Now, the name the first chapter is said by Ben Zoma. Does anybody know where we read of Ben Zoma? In the Seder of Pesach. Now, Ben Zoma is one of the four rabbis who went into Pardes, the four rabbis who went into study, and there's a debate in the rabbinic tradition as to what Pardes is. Pardes is again the depth, the study. Some say it's Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. The simple explanation, what is alluded to, what is discerned from it, and then the mystery of Torah. And the question is, what did the rabbis grapple with? The rabbis grappled with the question, some say the question that Heidegger asked, why is there something rather than nothing? And others say, why do the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper? Which means the two questions of the world that we have is, why is there a world? And then the question is, why is that justice not manifest in the world? Of the four rabbis, one what? One went crazy, one died, one lost his faith, and only Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and came out in peace. Only he was able to handle asking the absolute ultimate questions. What? You got to speak a drop louder.
She knows it from the book as a driven leaf.
Right, that's As a Driven Leaf by Milton Steinberg, which deals with the rabbi who lost his faith, Elisha ben Abuya, who, by the way, is quoted here in the Talmud, normally in this chapter. Normally he's referred to as Acher, the other one. And what became for him the most decisive moment in his journey to loss of faith was a father went up, turned to his son and said, go up on the ladder and shoo the bird away from the nest, because we want to take the egg of the bird. And the child went up, which is to fulfill two commandments. The first commandment is what? Kabed et avicha v'et imecha, honor your father and your mother. And the other is shiluach hakein, which is you cannot take an egg when the mother bird is there. It's part of our sensitivity to what the relationship between mother and child is, in the same way in which we don't want mix milk and meat, because meat, again, is the dead animal, and milk is what gives the animal life. And when the child fell down and died, he said, the world is let din v'let dayan, the world is without a judge and without judgment. How could God make this happen? But let's learn from Ben Zoma for a moment, and we continue. Mr. Dvern, why don't you read? Let's teach us from Ben Zoma. And this is, we're giving you the opportunity to be the wise son, not the wise guide.
Who is wise? Those who learn from everyone, as it is written, from all my teachers have I gained understanding. Who is mighty? Those who conquered their evil impulse, as it is written. One who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and one who rules over one's spirit than one who conquers a city.
And the next one, so we complete the mission.
Who is rich? Those who are content with their portion, as it is written. When you eat the labor of your hands, happy will you be, and all will be well with you. Happy will you be refers to this world. All will be well with you refers to the world that is coming. Who is honored? Those who honor all people, as it is written. Those who honor me, I will honor, but those who scorn me will be despised.
Okay, let's go and understand this. Where does wisdom come from? You learn from everybody and from everything. And that is, if you say, I'll only learn from this, that, the other thing, you're what?
Not too wise.
You're not too wise. And my father used to have it in a very basic way. He said, any idiot can learn from their mistakes. What makes you smarter is you learn from somebody else's. But the reality is that this is an openness to learning, an openness to learning from everyone. Who is mighty, and in that sense, Gibor is strong. And the great battle is, again, an ethical battle, not a military battle for the rabbis. The ethical battle is the ethical battle of somebody who can what? Conquer their spirit, conquer their yetzer in that sense. And again, part of that is their evil impulse. And if you conquer your evil impulse, then that is strong. I sometimes say of my beloved wife that Melissa always does the right thing, but that's only after contemplating doing all of the wrong things. And I have a quarrel with my good friend Elliot Dorff, Rabbi Elliot Dorff, which is most of us do the right things after we struggle against our evil impulse. But I've never seen him struggle against an evil impulse. And therefore, I'm not sure that he's mighty in that sense. His natural inclination is to do right and do good and be gracious and generous. Most of us struggle against the evil impulse, and part of that also involves the question of self-control. And be careful of those who do not have self-control. And this is, the next two are appropriate critiques of the world in which we live. Who is rich? The Hebrew is hasamech b'chalko, one who is content with what he has. And if you're not content with what you have, you somehow, no matter what you have, you can't be what? You can't be rich. If you want more, then in that sense, you're not quite there because you're never satiated. You're never satisfied. And it's, again, who is rich? One who is happy with his lot, who's content with his portion. And contentment and that type of sense of enough, I have enough, that's a certain sense of spiritual tranquility. Versus what the notion of I need more, no matter what I have, it's not enough. And then the last is, again, a critique of the world in which we live. Who is honored? Those who honor all people. You're not honored by receiving honor. You're honored by giving honor. And think of that as an ethical principle. And you honor all people. And God says, those who honor me I will honor, but those who scorn me will be despised. Clear? Any questions on this? And again, think of this as an ethical critique of the world in which we live. Yes?
Michael, how did we, the Jewish people, get it so wrong then? It's so obvious. We should learn from everyone. And yet, I would argue that not our tradition here, but the bulk of our tradition is, no, we don't learn from anyone but Jewish sources and Jewish teachers.
Well, I would argue that some of the great Jews, let's think of Maimonides. Maimonides learned philosophy from everybody from Aristotle to Christian and Islamic philosophers. He learned medicine from all sources, not just from Jews. Remember, you have a struggle. And this is, again, Ben Zoma, who's willing to explore. And when Ben Zoma, who's willing to explore, to learn from all sources, part of what people who are not secure in where they are want to do is to close off the others. Those who are secure can open up to the others. And the greatest of Jews incorporated. This is a difference, ironically, there's an interesting language differential between assimilation and acculturation. Anybody know the distinction between assimilation and acculturation? Assimilation is you want to be like the culture that is out there. Acculturation is you take elements of the culture and you incorporate it into your own tradition. So in that sense, there's a famous article by Gershon Cohen, who was the chancellor of the seminary, a great Jewish historian, and he said the blessings of assimilation, by which, if you read the article, the language was not clear then between assimilation and acculturation. What he said is part of the genius of the Jews has been to be able to learn from each society and enhance their tradition on the basis of that society. And I can give you a minor example in American Jewish history. Let me put this down because Rebecca has taught us we cannot eat near the pulpit.
Just this pulpit, I don't care about the others.
Rabbi Schatz has taught us we can't eat from the pulpit, and since I'm trying to learn from everybody, I have to learn how to behave from Rabbi Schatz. At least try to learn how to behave. Let's take a very simple example. If you look at the charters historically, if you look at the charters of synagogues, and you ask, when did the synagogue become an American synagogue? You will see the charters of the synagogue almost always then talk in their formation of the voluntary association of community, the voluntary creation of community, almost modeled after a Declaration of Independence Constitution. You also see something else is when the language changes, first from Portuguese, then from Spanish, then from German, and then from Yiddish into English as the charter of synagogues. If you go to old synagogues, you will read their original charter being in Yiddish, or their original charter, Spanish-Portuguese synagogue, which is the oldest in America, the original charter is in Portuguese, which, Larry, I'm not sure any member of the congregation at this point can understand. So, but that's the difference, that you have a person who is secure in their knowledge can learn from everybody. That's a different attitude than one who is frightened that if you learn, you will be tempted by what you see. Yes?
When was this written? When did I say that? This kind of goes against the grain of manifest destiny, the conquering of other nations. That's the meaning. The military battles that countries fight under the idea that that's the way to prosperity and ultimately peace. This is more of an individual code.
This is written, let's put it to you very simply, it evolved. You have rabbis of different periods of time. Ben Zoma lived in the years 130 of the Common Era. Earlier, you have people who lived at the turn of the Common Era. You have people who lived later because Rabbinic Judaism was evolving. This is written at a very important point, which is when the Haggadah first got compiled, which is when we have a pacifistic tradition because we've gotten burned by two defeats. We were defeated in the year 70, we were defeated in the year 135, and consequently the battle turned not externally but internally, and in that sense it's a quietistic document. Think, for example, let's take the Haggadah as an example. A revolution, and I'll give you a very interesting example from the Haggadah. In the secular Haggadot that were written at the period of the early Zionist movement and then at the creation of the State of Israel, the prayer Dayenu never exists. The Psalm Dayenu, because a revolutionary generation wants it all. Right? You don't say it's sufficient. One person described the Dayenu as the anthem of limited expectations, which is pejorative, but here you have it as positive. Who's rich? Those who are content with what they have. And imagine, again, being, what does it mean to be poor? You don't have enough. Now, some people who are very rich don't have enough. And in one sense, that's a little bit pathetic. The great rich people that we see are people who say, I have enough, now I want to do something with what I have. Right? Think of, the Warren Buffetts, the Bill Gates, the Michael Bloombergs, et cetera, the people who say, I have sufficient. Now let's see what I can do with what I have amassed, with what I can do. And Bill Gates has decided that he's going to spend $250 billion, $200 billion over the next 20 years and close down his foundation. Again, that's an example of who is rich, one who's comfortable in what he has. Yes.
Before this session began, I told Marshall that if you're going to learn from everyone, if you're going to be open-minded, you need strong analytical skills, otherwise you're falling into being gullible. And I remember when I read the book on emotional intelligence, it opens with a quote by Aristotle who talks about anger. It's not difficult to get angry. It doesn't take a whole lot of intelligence to get angry, but you got to know to which extent to get angry, with whom to get angry, to what is worth getting angry about. You have to. There's such a thing as using your anger intelligently and wisely, as opposed to just getting angry at anything. Because a lot of our social movements, like the civil rights movement, was a result of a lot of people being angry about segregation. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers resulted because the mothers were angry that they lost their family members to the drunk drivers.
Well, you've said something very profound. What you're really saying is, first of all, there are things that are worthy of getting angry about. And then the question becomes twofold. What are you going to do with your anger? And how do you channel it? How do you channel it into a way that is useful? And we have an example sitting in our midst, a man who's infuriated by injustice and changes it into what? Into union organizing.
The triangle fire, people were so angry with working conditions in labor conditions that it resulted in a lot of legislation to change working conditions of Americans that were just abused.
And again, we have the same thing sometimes in the response to mass murders by guns, in which one group says, let's have prayers and consolation. Another group says, let's have legislation that does something about what age people can possess guns, what training they need. Why is it that we have licenses and preparation? You have to pass a license to drive a car, but you don't have to pass a license to what? To own and carry a gun, etc. So the question always is, what anger do you want? And John Lewis taught us that in a beautiful thing. He said, by what? He used the word, there's good trouble. There's good trouble, not only bad trouble. Let's continue, because I've been given a time framework, so we'll continue with the next Mishnah. Larry, why don't you borrow Diane? Oh, you're reading, so let's go with the next Mishnah. Ben Azai taught.
Ben Azai taught, pursue a minor mitzvah as you would a major one, and flee from a transgression, for one good deed leads to another, and one transgression generates another. Thus, the reward for a mitzvah is another mitzvah, and the consequence for a transgression is another transgression.
Now, if you ask the question, what is the strategy of Chabad? Why are they enormously successful? They, instead of making you guilty about what you didn't do, they celebrate what you do. And they say one mitzvah at a time. And if you do one mitzvah, that's terrific, that's wonderful, that's marvelous, that's great, and they make you feel good about yourself. And the other thing is that some people do big things right and little things wrong. And the little things that they do that are wrong annoy you to hell. Let's read one more Mishnah, and because I love this Mishnah, let's go continue. Please, Diane. The other Diane.
This was a favorite teaching of his. Do not disdain any person, and do not underrate the importance of anything. For there is no person who does out of his or her hour, and there is no thing without its place in the sun. Every dog has his day.
When I was in school, there was a quarterback who came in at the Harvard-Yale game in the third quarter and proceeded to score, to lead to 4 touchdowns in the third and fourth quarter to beat Yale decisively. And he then got the role of the starting quarterback, and he never had another good game. And his comment on this was a wonderful comment. He said, look, I had my moment in the sun, and the tragedy is I could have been on the bench. You know, as I was called into the game, chances are that I should have been on the bench. This was my moment. Everybody, what it's saying is every human being has a moment in life, and everything that you see has its moment and its purpose. And don't disdain someone because that may be their moment. There may be a moment coming. And if you think of that, that's a wonderful surprise. And it's a wonderful acceptance of all of our humanness, and the idea that we have to accept each of us, etc. Okay, last one, and this is Rabbi Levitas of Yavne. Yavne, remember, is the academy that was formed right after the destruction of the temple. He was a descendant of the academy that was formed by Yochanan ben Zakkai. Be exceedingly humble, for a mortal's only prospect is the grave. Well, there are 2 famous jokes about that. There was a synagogue in which the rabbi had an entrance called Shiviti Hashem Lenegdi Tamid. God is before me always. The cantor had an entrance called Dalef Ne Miatomed, know before whom you stand. And the joke about it is that on the eve of Yom Kippur, the rabbi walked in, he opened the ark, and he said, "O Lord, I am nothing, you are everything." And he began to read what is Tfilat Zakah. Tfilat Zakah is said before Kol Nidre by the pious. It's a beautiful self-negation. And he sat down and he cried. The cantor comes in and looks at that. God, I am nothing, you are everything, and I hope that with my voice I can inspire the community to understand Judaism and to live a Jewish life and repent. And he sits down and cries. The shamus, the sexton, the ritual director comes in, opens the ark and says, "I am nothing." And the cantor turns to the rabbi, "Psst, psst, take a look at who thinks he's nothing." The last point I want to make on this is that there's a Hasidic story with which we'll conclude, because that's also the contribution of wisdom, which is that if you want to know what is a human being, you have to put 2 things in your pocket. One is Anochi Afar Va'efer, I am but dust and ashes. And the other is I'm created in the image of God. And if somebody asks you what is a human being, you put your hands into your pocket, you take out both slips, you clap your hands, and the combination of I am nothing, but I'm created in the image of God, that's what human beings are. We conclude with this, Akasha ben, let me conclude with this, and we should do, over the next 27 years, we should complete Pirkei Avot as a community. It's really worth it, and it's a great study. Rabbi Chananya ben Akashi Omer Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu Zakot Yisrael Lefichach Hirba Lehem Torah Mitzvot Shenemar Adonai Chafetz Leman Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir. Chananya ben Akashi taught, the Holy One, blessed be He, desired to benefit the people of Israel, therefore God gave them the Torah with abundance of mitzvot. It is written, Adonai was pleased for the sake of God's righteousness to make the Torah great and glorious.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, go to www.tbala.org.